every 12 to 19 years, Jagannath will get a new body. And there's a very big ritual with many Brahmins who are blessed to locate the trees for the Sudarshan Chakra, Baladev, Jagannath, and Subhadra. But I don't have time to go into all that. But before I start, I do want to show you a wonderful book. I don't think it's very well known, but it is just full of wonderful Jagannath nectar historically. And can you see this?
Yes, Mataji.
It's
Vaikuntha
called
on earth.
Etra, Vaikuntha on Earth. And it's by Touchstone Media Press. And this is the kind of book that you start to turn the page, and wherever you turn the page, there is just nectar oozing from the page. So if you can find that book, I think you would very much enjoy the book, and you would be finding yourself coming closer and closer to Lord Jagannath.
Mataji, if you can send us a photo of that, I'll circulate it.
Okay, after I'll do that. Yes. So I was going to speak a little bit on some of the historical aspects, the historical and the functional aspects of Rathayatra. Functional return refers to actually the carving of the deities, the building of the carts, etc., and the actual Rathayatra festival. And depending on how much time, there's just so much, 1 hour is not such a large amount of time for discussing the widespread glories of Lord Jagannath, but I'll do my best to give some indication. So a little bit of the background Rathayatra information. That Jagannath Puri is a town of about 75,000 people, maybe a little bit more, and it's considered one of the most important pilgrimage centers and one of the 4 holiest cities in India. So those 4 cities are Badrinath in the north, Dwarka in the west, and Rameshwar in the south, and Puri in the east. So in Badrinath, Badri Narayan is especially worshipped in the Satya Yuga. And in Rameshwar, Rama was worshipped in the Treta Yuga. And then Dwarkanath was worshipped in Dwarka during the Dwapara Yuga. But Lord Jagannath in Puri can be worshipped by everyone in Kali Yuga. In fact, the importance of Jagannath Puri is sometimes called Purushottam Kshetra, and it's explained in the Narada Purana. And there it's stated that simply by visiting Puri and seeing the deity of Jagannath, one can obtain freedom from future birth and reach the spiritual abode. Now, we may be thinking, oh, but how can I get to Puri? However, Prabhupada, in his boundless mercy, has introduced Lord Jagannath to the West, and therefore wherever Lord Jagannath is present, that place is as good as Vaikuntha, as good as Puri. In one letter to a devotees in 1968, Prabhupada was saying that Jagannath, the devotee asked, what's the difference between Krishna and Jagannath? And Prabhupada was explaining that actually there is no difference. Krishna means himself and all his different expansions. And sometimes Krishna appears as Vasudeva, sometimes as Shankarshan, sometimes as Jagannath, sometimes as Lord Chaitanya, and sometimes as Rama. So Jagannath is another feature of Krishna, and he's especially favorable to people who are not so strictly advanced in Brahminical culture and Vedic rituals. So that would mean all of us, you know. And then he was saying that whether we serve Jagannath or Radha Krishna, the effect is the same. But facilitating the worship of the Lord in the form of Jagannath is more congenial than others. And when anything is offered to Jagannath, it does not mean it is not taken by Krishna. In the temple, when we offer to Jagannath, it is also accepted by Krishna. And Prabhupada emphasized this. It's also accepted by Krishna. Rest assured of this fact. So there's no difference between Jagannath and Krishna. Jagannath is Krishna. And because Jagannath is so merciful, just like Lord Chaitanya is so merciful, Lord Jagannath is similarly merciful. So in the middle of Sri Kshetra, Jagannath Puri, there's the large temple dedicated to Lord Jagannath. And from the Skanda Purana, we get the information that the original construction, the Adi construction, the original construction of the first Jagannath temple was in Satya Yuga, which is millions of years ago. And it's related that Lord Jagannath told Maharaj Indrajumna that he first appeared in the Swayambhuva Manvantar during the first part of Satya Yuga on the full moon day, because he was pleased by the devotion of his bhaktas. And this was about 153 million years ago. Amazing, isn't it? And then Brahma installed the deities in the temple. So his appearance is celebrated by the Sna Purnima, or Ratha-Yatra, which is a public bathing of Jagannath, his brother Baladeva and his sister Subhadra. And then the celebrated Rathayatra festival is said to have started sometime in the Swaro Chisra Manu, or the second Manvantar period. And it's predicted to continue until the end of the second half of Lord Brahma's lifetime. And we all know that Lord Brahma lives such a long lifetime. With our little brains, we can barely calculate or understand it. So even in the Ramayana by Valmiki, it's related that when Lord Ram was getting ready to leave this world, he instructed Vivishwan, Ravana's younger brother, that in his absence, in the absence of Ram, he should worship Lord Jagannath, the Lord of the Ikshvaku dynasty. So the Skanda Purana, it fixes a date. There's like a fixed date for the Rathayatra festival in Puri. And it's on the second date of the bright fortnight in the month of Ashada, a date called Pushyami Nakshatra. And this is by astrological calculation. In the Padma Purana, it describes that in Purushottam Kshetra, or Jagannath Puri, the supremely blissful personality of Godhead pretends to be made out of wood. But although the Lord takes on what appears to be a material form, it is actually completely spiritual by the Lord's mercy, the causeless mercy of the Lord for the conditioned souls. And actually, Prabhupada said, if you're looking at the deity as metal, stone, or wood, actually that is an offense. You may be, but that material form becomes spiritualized, purely spiritualized by the presence of the Lord. So the main temple in Sri Kshetra, also the main temple is known Sri Mandir. It was built in the 12th century by King Choda Gangadev. And the site goes back much, much further, as we mentioned above. And the complex is simply gigantic. It's huge. And it is so big that as many as 5,000 priests and assistants live there.
What?
And the entire compound is surrounded by a very thick stone wall that's 20 feet tall. and it encloses this other area that is 665 feet by 640 feet. So you get the, I'm mentioning these numbers so you can just get the idea of the vastness of the temple Sri Mandir. And then there's 4 large gates on each side. And then sometime in this, after the 16th century, some smaller buildings were constructed. So the main temple where the deities are kept, Jagannath, Baladev, Subhadra, the main temple is 215 feet in height. And their throne is 5 foot high. It's made of some type of black stone that comes from the area. So the pilgrims, when they enter the temple, the deity is facing the pilgrim in the temple room. And the temple room there is only illuminated by oil lamps. They're not using electricity inside. So there's an arti ceremony 6 times a day, beginning at 4 a.m. through 9 p.m. And during the darshan, the devotees are singing, they're chanting, and they're worshiping the deities in ecstasy. And daily, as many as 50,000 people come to the Jagannath temple for darshan. So another wonderful aspect of the Jagannath Mandir is the kitchen. It's huge temple, it's a huge kitchen, and there's over 650 cooks and helpers. And they make hundreds of vegetarian preparations in clay pots for the 54 separate offerings that are given to the deities every single day. And then after the food is offered to the deities, it becomes prasad, the Lord's mercy. And especially, I mean, Krishna prasad, we could speak on that topic for hours and days, but even more merciful is the mercy of Jagannath prasad. We all know how people come back from India and they'll have some little like straw basket or some cloth with Jagannath prasad, and they'll give you just a little piece in your hand. And it may be months or weeks old, but it's so wonderful. It's so magical because the Lord has tasted it. And it says this spiritually powerful food, one can become more and more spiritually surcharged and free from past karma. You know, we can eat our way back to Godhead if we just take Krishna prasad. So the significance of Jagannath Puri is how the deities first appeared, and that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years to the time of King Indrajumna, who was a great devotee of Lord Vishnu. And one time, this King Indrajumna heard from a devotee about an incarnation of Vishnu named Nila Madhava, a deity form of Vishnu. And the king desired to have darshan. So he sent many Brahmins out to search for this Nila Madhava, and every one of them came back unsuccessful, except for Vijapati, who didn't even come back at all. So Vijapati had wandered into a distant town, which was a tribal town, a tribal village of people known as Shabaras, or non-Aryan heritage. And while he was there, he stayed in the house of Vishwasu. And later on, at the request of this Vishwasu, he married his daughter Lalita. So Vijapati, and you may wonder, well, why didn't he tell the king any of this? But you know, in those days, they didn't have WhatsApp or internet or, you know, mobile phones, landline, they didn't have anything, you know, he was way far away. So now he's there, he's married to the daughter, Lalita, and then he starts to notice that Vishwashu would leave the house every night and return the next day around noontime. So he asked his wife, what's going on? And her father had told her not to tell anyone. So she told Vijapati that Vishwasu goes in secret to worship Nila Madhava. So now Vijapati's heart must be pounding, because that was the reason he had gone out from, in the first place. The reason he had left Sri Kshetra in the first place was to find, where is this Nila Madhava? And now he finds out that in the very house where he is now living with his new wife, his father-in-law is going every night to see and worship this Nilamadeva. So he starts to beg, please, please, please take me, please, I want to take darshan. And finally he got permission. But the permission came with condition. Permission with condition. He had to be blindfolded. And the wife, Lalita, gave her husband some mustard seeds in a cloth so that he could drop a few along the trail and later he could follow. So when they reached the shrine, Vijapati saw the deity Nilamadeva after the Shabara took off his blindfold, and he just felt such ecstasy seeing this beautiful deity. And there's a story that Visvasu was collecting some items for worship in the nearby forest, and Vijapati saw a bird fall into a nearby lake and drowned. And then the soul of the bird suddenly took a spiritual form and descended back to the spiritual world. And Vijapati was overcome with some sentiment, and he also wanted to do the same thing. And he climbed up the tree to jump into the lake. And then he heard a voice from the sky that declared, before you jump, you should tell King Indrajumna that you have found Nilamadeva. So he didn't jump. And when Vishvasu returned to worship the deity, Nilamadeva spoke to him. And he said that for so long I have been accepting your simple worship. But now he wanted to accept the opulent worship of King Indrajumna. And a voice told him he should build a temple on the top of Nila Hill, where the king could see the Lord as Daru Brahma, the wooden manifestation of the Absolute. So with great endeavor, King Indrajumna, he arranged for the temple of Sri Kshetra, now known as Jagannath Puri. And later he was praying to Lord Brahma to consecrate it. But Lord Brahma said that's not within his power to do that, since Sri Kshetra is manifested by the supreme will of the Lord, his internal potency. And it's where the Lord himself manifests. So Brahma put a flag on the top of the temple, and he blessed that flag, saying, anyone who saw that flag from a distance and offered obeisances would easily be liberated from the material world. And we know that even the Lord made a place for Haridas Thakur where he could see the dome and see that flag, because Haridas couldn't enter the temple. So the Lord obviously knew, Mahaprabhu knew the potency of this, just seeing this flag on the top of the dome of the temple. Anyway, after much waiting, the king was anxious, and he was waiting for Nilamadeva to manifest, and it hadn't happened. And he was thinking, my life is just useless. So he decided he was going to end his life by fasting. But in a dream, the Lord said, you don't need to do that. I will appear floating in from the sea in the form of Daru Brahman. Daru means wood, So then the king went to the shore, and he found this huge piece of wood that had the markings of a conch, a disc, a club, and a lotus, thus indicating the potency of this was no ordinary piece of wood. This was Daru Brahman. But try as they might, all the king's men could not budge that wood. They couldn't move it. In a dream, the Lord spoke to the king, and he instructed him to get Visvasu and put a golden chariot in front of the Daru Brahman. So the king did this, and then after performing kirtan, chanting of the holy names and praying for Daru Brahman to mount the chariot, Daru Brahman was easily moved. And then Lord Brahma performed a sacrifice where the present temple now stands, and he installed the deity of Lord Nrsingadev that is now on the western side of the temple. So for the wooden Daru Brahma, the king requested many expert carvers to carve the form, but none of them could do it. Every time they came with their chisels, boom, the chisel would break when they touched the wood. Finally, the architect of the demigods, Vishwakarma, arrived, appearing like an old man, Ananta Maharana. And he promised he could and he would carve the deity form of the Lord inside the temple in 3 weeks if the king would allow him to work behind closed doors. After 14 days or 2 weeks, the king became really anxious because all of a sudden he couldn't hear the carving sounds, clink, clink, clink. He couldn't take it. So on the advice of the queen, he opened the doors of the temple to see what was happening. When he opened the door, he saw the form of Jagannath, Balarama, Devi, and Subhadra. But because the king had opened the doors sooner than he was supposed to, he interrupted. The deities were not completed. Their hands and their feet had not been carved. And thus the Supreme manifested himself in this form. Now, the king felt he had committed a really great offense for having opened the doors before the allotted 3 weeks. So again, he decides to end his life. But in a dream, Lord Jagannath appears in that wonderfully so-called unfinished form with his beautiful smiling face. And he told the king, even though he had broken his promise, this was just part of his supreme, the Lord's supreme pastimes, to display this particular form. And the king was told this form, even if it appeared to be incomplete, was actually the form that the Lord was meant to be worshipped in this age of Kali. Jagannath Swami Ki Jai. So occasionally the king could decorate the deity with golden hands and feet. And yet those devotees who are filled with love always see the form of Lord Jagannath as the threefold bending form of Sham Sundar, as described in the Brahma Samhita, with Krishna, threefold bending form holding a flute. So thus the Supreme, he appears in this form so people could approach and see him, especially as he rides through his town on the huge carts during the Rathayatra festival. Because we all know in Puri, not everyone can enter the Lord's temple. Even Indira Gandhi, when she was president or prime minister, whatever she was of India, she was not allowed to enter the temple, you know. So usually the Rathayatra festival, which is when everybody, no matter what caste, what country, what religion, what faith, everyone will see the Lord during Rathayatra. That is his unique and special mercy. So it's usually in July when it's quite hot, but still thousands upon thousands will flock to Puri to take part in this auspicious event. And it's, I mean, and some years when the deity changes his body, millions of people come, over 2 million. Incredible amount of people come. And this is the oldest auspicious event to be celebrated, making it the oldest and the largest of religious festivals in the world. The only other festival that is bigger is the Kumbh Mela, the Magh Kumbh Mela, the big one. And that draws more millions. But the Rathayatra festival, by the way, it's financed primarily by the Orissa government. So at least somehow or other, those people in that government, they get some sukriti from offering the Lakshmi for Rathayatra festival. Now the construction of the carts begins 2 months before the festival day, on the 3rd day of the bright fortnight of Vaishakha in April and May. That's when they start. And more than 600 trees or 400 cubic meters of wood are needed for the construction, taken from the local forests along the banks of the Mahanadi River. And they use simple tools and the same procedures that they have for the past hundreds of years. And once the basic elements are made, such as the wheels, then the actual construction begins with just a few weeks before the festival. And the construction crew, which is, includes, the actual workers and even their children. It's like a family affair, and they worked around the clock, day and night. And miraculously, every year, everything is ready the day before the festival. Now, this year was particularly kind of exciting because the government had said no Rathayatra this year because of the COVID virus, right? And the Jagannath Bhaktas just couldn't believe their ears. They just couldn't believe they couldn't even accept that was a possibility, no Rathayatra. So they were constructing the carts. And people would see, sometimes you get posts onto Facebook to see where the carts stood in their construction. They were determined. There was going to be a Rathayatra, no matter what. And at the last minute, in fact, there was a Rathayatra. Of course, there was restrictions, and the hundreds and thousands of people were not able to come. But if you look at the videos, still a good number of people came. And Lord Jagannath came out, and there was a wonderful Rathayatra. In spite of the decision not to have a Rathayatra, Lord Jagannath prevailed. So in the main road in front of the temple, the huge stacks of wood that are used to construct the chariots, and the chariots are like 3 stories tall, and the wheels that roll the chariots, they're 8 feet high, and they're made with wood. And they're not using nails and big staples and screws like when we make our Rath carts. We're using all these electrical devices and metal items to keep things together, and they don't do that. It's all by wood. And if there has to be something to hold it together, then there's a little hole where a piece of wood that's carved will go in that hole to hold things together. So when we had our first Rathayatra in London, which was actually before we even had the temple, Shamsundar was trying to faithfully, as much as possible, duplicate the mood of the Rath car. We were only going to have one, but he wanted it to be as far as possible duplicated. So he made these gigantic wooden wheels. And well, what happened was we, on the day of the Rathayatra, got the signal. We're at Marble Arch in London, a very famous place. Thousands of people are there, not just because of us, but it's a famous place. But a good number of those people were there because here was the first time in history that Jagannath was going to roll in the streets of London. And we start to pull the cart, and we got less than 1 block. And the wheel by Baladev, cracked and crumbled. It was the end of the Rathayatra cart, but it wasn't the end of the festival. The devotees came, and they took the stronger devotees. They carried each one of the deities, Jagannath, Subhadra, Baladev, in their arms, and carried on the Rath festival without the Rath. But the kirtan went on in full swing, and of course they reached Marble Arch and continued. And poor Shamsundar and a few other devotees were left alone to dismantle the cart and get it off the street because all the traffic was blocked. It was said that was the biggest traffic jam ever in London. And Shamsundar was feeling so dejected that this had happened, just felt so dejected. And Prabhupada was jubilant. He wrote him a wonderful letter that, no, it was successful. The deities came out, they were seen, even if you don't have a temple. Lord Jagannath came. It doesn't even matter that you have a temple. By bringing Lord Jagannath out, by attempting to have the Rathayatra, simply by seeing the cart, simply by seeing the deities, everything was perfect. So Prabhupada had quite faith in the presence of Lord Jagannath and specifically Rathayatra. So the chariots, once they're finished, they're painted with bright colors. You've all seen that, you know, blue, yellow, red, many colors. And the tops of the canopies are covered with red, black, yellow, or green canopies. And the colors signify which chariot is for which deity. So Jagannath's chariot uses a red and yellow canopy, and Balaram's canopy is red and green, and Subhadra's canopy is red and black. And the deities are also painted with particular colors that mean something. So Jagannath's blackish face represents faultless qualities, and Balaram's white color signifies enlightenment, and Subhadra's yellow color signifies goodness. And each card is somewhat different. The card of Lord Jagannath is called Chakra Dwaj or Nandi Ghosh. And this means tumultuous and blissful sound. And there's 16 to 18 wheels. And it's 45 feet tall, and that cart weighs 65 tons. And it also has Garuda, a figure of Garuda on its crest, and it's drawn by 4 white horses. And each one of those horses has a name, but I didn't have time to look that up and get the names. But if you get this book, what I showed you, this information will be there. And then Balaram's cart is called the Taladwaj, and that means the sound of significantly powerful rhythm. And his cart has 14 to 16 wheels, and it's drawn by 4 black horses. And Hanuman is on its crest. And Subhadra's cart is called Pana Dwaj, or Darpadalam, and that means destroyer of pride. And it has a lotus on its crest and 12 wheels, and it's drawn by 4 red horses. And after the Rathayatra festival, the wood from these carts is used for the big kitchen in the temple, and it lasts up to 9 months. In other words, it's used to cook the vogue offerings for the Lord. It's simply amazing when you think about that, because how many trees go into making those carts every year. And then the carts, what Prabhupada say, the carts are non-different from Krishna. So the carts that are non-different for Krishna supply the wood to cook the vogue offering for Jagannath, the Krishna, during the year. So 2 weeks before the festival, of course, I've already mentioned that Jagannath, Balaram, and Subhadra, they're given their ritual bath, and that's the Ratha-Yatra. It's performed in the front main wall of the temple. And in this way, everyone is allowed to observe it from the street, or you can get up on the roof of some of the surrounding buildings. And then after this, we know how Lord Jagannath has a pastime of becoming a little ill, a little cold, and then they're taken to a designated area, and they're given special treatment, special herbal medicine, special prasadam and offerings. And also they don't get up so early at this time because they're not well. So they instead of having a 4:30 arti or something, it's a little later. And during this time, they may also be repainted. So they don't use, like we use like enamel paints, but they use these very natural type of paint with the colors are from local plants and herbs. So it can become decreased over the year. So they get touched up and repainted. So then every 12 or 9 years, the bodies of the deities are replaced with new ones. And as I mentioned, it's ritualistically selected Daru Brahman, a tree in the form of a neem tree. And this is known as the Nava Kelevarna festival. And it occurs when there's a leap year or an additional month in the Vedic calendar. And it appears between Ratha-Yatra and Rathayatra. And on the occurrence of this Nava Kelevarna festival, or the new bodies of the Lord appear, that particular Rathayatra, you can expect 2.5 million people coming. So when the deities are first brought out after their seclusion, the first out is Lord Balaram, and then Lady Subhadra, and then Lord Jagannath. And each time they emerge, so much excitement. It's like electricity fills the air, and many men are blowing conchas, banging on drums and cymbals to announce the arrival of the deities. And the crowds are shouting and chanting, Jai Baladev, Ki Jai, Jagannath Swami Ki Jai, Subhadra Mai Ki Jai, with full force and enthusiasm. And generally, unless you're situated on one of the tall surrounding buildings, you don't see the deities' faces because so many assistants are there. But they have on these very large headdresses made of shola, which is a type of, from a type of tree. And so they have these big headdresses. So you see the headdress and then you know, oh, there's Balaram. Oh, there's Jagannath, there's Subhadra. And after, once they are put on the cart, those headdresses are taken off and torn into pieces and distributed among the people as prasad. So the people that lift the deities are the Daityas. And this goes way back to the original time of Lord Jagannath being manifest. So they're very strongly built men. And it's described that when they carry Balaram, they move him from one, or Jagannath, from one cotton pillow to another. These pillows are called tulis. But people, devotees who have gone during that time, they report not being able to see these pillows. So we're not sure if, sometimes things change slightly. So maybe the pillows are there or not. But still, the deities are big. And the Balaram, 5'5", his arm span is 12 feet. So when he's carried, there's 5 people just on each arm. That's 10 people, with up to 50 people in the front pulling and 20 in the back offering support. They have like a rope around his neck, and they move the rope and they move him forward. And it takes about a half an hour to leave the temple, and then he moves to the temple gate to the chariot, and then placed up on the chariot, and then everyone can see him. And then Subhadra, and she's very small, less than 5 feet, and she's carried from the temple to her chariot. And then finally, Lord Jagannath emerges, and you can imagine how everybody becomes incredibly ecstatic. Even if they don't see him, they just see this shola crown. And he's 5 feet 7 inches, as mentioned, and also 12-foot arm span. So in the same way, there's so many assistants are there to help move him. And then finally, once the deities are all up on their respective carts, the king of Puri arrives in a procession. And he walks up the planks to the platform, and he sweeps the cart with a golden-handled broom. He sprinkles sandalwood-scented water on the carts. He circumambulates the platform 3 times, assisted by police, and he does this on each cart. Now, if you've read the accounts of Rathayatra as described in Caitanya Charitamrita, there are some minor differences in the festival compared to 500 years ago. And one of the minor differences, the king used to sweep the street in front of the carts as they paraded down the town. The king would be there in front of the cart sweeping with his golden broom. So the reason that has changed and he no longer does this is related in a particular story, that once upon a time in Puri, the king was Purushottam Dev. And King Purushottam Dev was scheduled to marry a princess who was the daughter of King Maharaj Salwo Narsingha from the district of Kanchi. So when the Rathayatra procession was to take place, the father of the princess was invited, but he sent his minister Chinubata Godranga instead. And when this minister Chinubata Gauraranga attended, the king of Puri was sweeping with great devotion and tradition, sweeping the roads in front of the Rathayatra carts. So this visiting minister, instead of being impressed by the devotion of the king to Lord Jagannath, he reported to King Swallow Narasingha that he objected that his daughter should not marry the king of Puri because he was just a street sweeper. So Purushottam Dev was really upset and angry that he, as the dear servant of Lord Jagannath, would be insulted like that. So he gathered his troops. Come on, let's go to Kanchi. We're going to teach this king a lesson. But unfortunately, King Purushottam Dev was badly defeated. So, you know, for one who's honored, dishonor is worse than death. So here the king of Puri is coming back to defeated, coming back to Puri was in a very downcast mood. And he stopped at the simple cottage of a local ascetic, the householder devotee of Jagannath, Saiketachacharya. And this devotee pointed out to the king that, my dear sir, you neglected to ask permission from Lord Jagannath before going to attack King Swallow. So with that realization, the king returned to Puri. He visited the temple of the Lord, crying about his defeat. He was asking, why did you let this happen? And he spent the night in the temple with closed doors. And before the night came to an end, the king heard a voice asking, why are you so distraught over such a simple thing? The voice said, go gather your troops again. And we two brothers, Jagannath and Baladev, will go along with you and fight on behalf of the king. And the news spread like wildfire. Many people, young and old, joined the force of the king to fight with their lordships. However, as they were going along, suddenly the king had a little doubt. Were the lordships really going with him? Were they really there? And while the king and his army went onward, far ahead, there were two soldiers riding on one on a black horse and one on a white horse. And these two soldiers stopped to quench their thirst at a small village near Chilika Lake. And they bought some yogurt from a devotee named Manika. And she gave the yogurt to them, and they took it immediately. But when she asked for payment, they said they didn't have any money. But instead, they gave her a jeweled ring. And they told her, King Purushottam Dev is coming. When he comes by, you show this ring and he will pay you. So after some time, the king caught up to where this lady was, and she flagged them down and gave them the ring, and she asked for payment for the soldier's drink. It must have been some lassi, right? Yogurt, so drink lassi. And the king was shocked because this was a Ratna Mudrika ring of Lord Jagannath. So immediately he regained his confidence that, yes, indeed, their lordships were certainly coming with them. So in payment for the ring, the king gave her the entire village. And that village is still named in her name, Manikapatana. So Manikapatana, that village is still there. And after this, the king and his troops were victorious over King Salwo. And this king, he took the king's daughter, like, you know, when you conquer, you get some spoils, right? So he took the king's daughter, but he didn't marry her because he was still feeling the insult that her father gave him. So he instructed his minister to see that she gets married to a qualified sweeper. So again, after 1 year, the next Rathayatra, again, the king was performing his sweeping ceremony. And at that time, the king's minister announced that the king was the most qualified sweeper, and since he swept for Lord Jagannath, and that the princess Padmavati should marry him. So then Maharaj Purushottam Dev married the princess, And later she gave birth to the great devotee of Lord Chaitanya, who became known as King Prataparuda. So King Prataparuda Ki Jai. At some point after this, the king of Puri discontinued sweeping in the streets. And then the custom as is existing now where he sweeps the carts started up. So after the king sweeps the carts, they quickly begin to disassemble the gangplanks that lead up to the cart. The wooden horses are mounted, pointing the direction, and thousands of devotees surround the carts. And the people in the front take up the long, thick ropes to pull the chariot down the main road to the Gundicha temple, where the deities will stay for a week. And Prabhupada said, you know, just seeing the chariot, that's liberating. Touching the chariot, which is non-different from Krishna, is liberating. What to speak of touching the rope? What to speak of pulling those ropes? So the leaders on the cart, they are near the wooden horses, and they direct those who are pulling the ropes to take up the slack. And when everything is ready, a whistle is blown, and the chariot driver and hundreds of people on each 4 ropes begin to pull. I think that each rope takes 100 or 200 persons, very long ropes, thick ropes. So 3 carts, 2 ropes, just hundreds of people. Then the numerous priests and assistants on the cart that ride along begin to bang on the goblins and the cymbals, and suddenly the cart lurches forward and begins to move. And you can just imagine the ecstasy that is just filling the hearts of every single person there. And once the cart gets going, you can hear the spectators, mostly you hear them shouting, Jai, Jai Jagannath, Jai Jagannath. And they raise their hands in the air as they watch the carts go by. And the police have to guard the wheels of the chariots to make sure no one is too close to get crushed under them. We have one devotee in New York, he lives in Long Island, that he has every year since the inception of Rathayatra in New York till this year, where there was no Jagannath Rathayatra, there was a virtual Rathayatra, but his service has been to guard the wheels from the carts so devotees don't get hurt. And he takes his service very seriously. And this was the first time, you know, he began as a young man. You know, you see a picture of him in the beginning of New York Rathayatra, a young man, you know, and now he's an older man with, you know, white hair, but he still has the same enthusiasm and determination to serve the Lord as the protector of the wheels so that nobody gets injured. Now, even though everybody is pulling so hard, sometimes mysteriously the chariots come to a halt. They just stop. And it's not unusual that sometimes they'll even remain in that place overnight and then continue the next day. Sometimes, if there's difficulty, the local government ministers, they pray to Lord Jagannath for forgiveness from whatever offenses the residents of the town have committed. And then the chariots begin to move again, as if only by the will of Jagannath. And we know from the Chaitanya Chaitamrita that sometimes when Lord Chaitanya was there, that the Jagannath carts would stop, the chariots would stop, and the people pull, and they just couldn't budge. And they would get elephants to push the carts, and they couldn't budge. And then Lord Chaitanya would stand in front of the carts with his raised arms, chanting. And first he would gaze into the eyes of Jagannath. And Lord Jagannath was gazing in the eyes of the Lord. And the Lord and Jagannath are non-different from each other. And then the cart would begin to move again. So the deities spend the first 2 nights on the cart outside of the Gundicha temple, or wherever they may stop for the night if they don't make it there on the first night. And during this time when the carts are halted, The pilgrims can climb up on the carts and see the devotees very closely and even be allowed to embrace them. But of course, the priests are very quick to charge some rupees, so it makes a good business. And some people simply just stay on the ground. They offer prayers and little ghee lamps from a distance. And others make it a point to climb on all three carts for personal darshan of the deities. And then on the third night, the deities are taken inside the Gundicha temple. And then they stay. And a week later, they return to the main temple in a similar parade that's attended by fewer people. And at this time, you can get much closer to the cart. You can walk easily with the parade. And if you have time to remain in Puri, this is actually a very wonderful time to be there. And again, the deities, they come out of the Gundicha temple with much fanfare. And again, the king of Puri comes, he cleanses the cart, and then they begin to pull back to the main temple. And this return trip generally happens in one day. However, once the deities reach the temple, they remain for 2 nights outside the temple on the carts, allowing everyone who wants to climb up on the cart for a close darshan. Then, on the third night, there's Avesta festival. And this is just an ecstatic darshan. The Avesta festival, and where the deities are dressed in gold outfits, not gold cloth, but real gold, including gold crowns, hands and feet, ornaments, like gold peacock feather, gold earrings, different gold necklaces, and then ornaments such as a pure silver conch and a golden disc chakra for Lord Jagannath and a golden club and plow for Balarama. All of these are solid gold, and altogether they weigh over 1 ton. So during this darshan, no one is allowed on the carts for the gold festival, for the Sunavest festival. No one except the intimate servants of the deities are allowed on the cart. And they have a special system so that the crowd can approach the cart on one side, and as you get closer, of course, the crowd gets thicker, and then the police direct the crowd to walk around the front of the cart, then down the side street, and they make sure everyone keeps moving. So as you are walking, you can look toward the deities to see them in their very unique gold ornaments. And they look especially powerfully dressed like this. Srila Prabhupada explained that the way to worship Jagannath is like a Kshatriya king in opulence. You know, he's not a cowherd boy. Subhadra is not a gopi. They are Kshatriya king and king. So after this darshan, the Sunavesh darshan, the deities stay one more day, and then they're taken into the main temple on the following evening. And that ends the Rathayatra festival until the next year. So the meaning, you know, the inner meaning of the Rathayatra festival is steeped in great sentiment. The form of Lord Krishna is taken as Jagannath, and it's a manifestation of his ecstasy that he feels when he leaves the opulence of his palaces in Dwarka, represented by the temple at Puri, to return to the town of Vrindavan and the pure and simple, spontaneous love the residents there have for him. So that is, of course, represented symbolically by the Gundicha temple. And there's no difference, as I mentioned already, between Lord Krishna and Lord Jagannath. So in the mood of separation from his loving devotees, Jagannath mounts his chariot to return to Vrindavan. And in this way, the esoteric meaning of Rathayatra is that we pull the Lord back into our hearts, rekindling the loving relationship we have with him. And there's many great poems and songs, such as Jagannathastakam, that have been composed describing this wondrous event and the highly ecstatic devotional mood one can enter while participating. Many verses are there in Caitanya Chaitamrita that describe the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu during these Rathayatra festivals over 500 years ago. And we know Lord Jagannath is the embodiment of Lord Krishna's love for Srimati Radharani. And while Lord Krishna was living in Dwarka, he felt great separation for Radharani and the residents of Vrindavan. So on the day of one solar eclipse, he traveled to Kurukshetra with his brother Balaram and his sister Subhadra on his chariot. And there he met Srimati Radharani and the other residents of Vrindavan. And they all wanted to take the Lord back to Vrindavan. And while traveling and thinking of this meeting, he entered into Mahabhav, the highest sentiments of loving exchange. And in this Mahabhav, his eyes dilated like fully bloomed lotuses, and his hands and legs withdrew into his body. And in this way, the form of Lord Jagannath is called Radha Viraha Vidura. So this Radha Viraha Vidura, the separation of Radharani, and also the Mahabhav Prakasha, the manifestation of Mahabhav for Radharani. Lord Chaitanya was the embodiment of Srimati Radharani's love for Lord Krishna. So Lord Chaitanya is taking Lord Jagannath from the main temple to the Gundicha corresponds with Srimati Radharani wanting to take Lord Krishna from Dwarka back to Vrindavan, the place of ecstatic love of God. And it's explained that by participating in this festival, chanting and dancing are helping pull the ropes of the chariots. One becomes free from many lifetimes of karma, and one can even become a liberated soul to the spiritual potency of Lord Jagannath's presence. So one of the ways this happens is explained as follows. At the very end of one's life, when the memory of all the past activities go through your mind, you can remember Lord Jagannath, amazing Rathayatra festival, and the mind will stop and focus on that event. And thus, remembering Lord Jagannath, one is liberated from the material existence and returns to the spiritual world. Just like a yogi is transferred to the spiritual strata when his mind is fixed on super soul at the time of death. So this is another reason why thousands of pilgrims come to Jagannath every year, to just get that beautiful darshan of the Lord imprinted in their mind and in their heart. Jagannath Swami ki jai, Lord Rathayatra, Jagannath Rathayatra ki jai, and Jagannath Puri ki jai. Please call back, whoever you are, in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Sorry, my other phone was ringing and I turned it off, but they kept calling. So that's just some reflections. Of course, so much more could be said, because even, with our present Rathayatra festivals, there's so many Rathayatra festivals now all over the world, beginning from 67 July in San Francisco, the first Rathayatra, a little over 50 years ago. And now there are hundreds, believe it or not, hundreds of Rathayatras all over the world, both large and small, in every major city and smaller cities, even in New Vrindavan. We'll be having ours on the 8th of July this year. It's a weekday because of the, that virus. We don't want to have such a large event. So we had the Ratha-Yatra yesterday, and it was nicely attended. But the Rathayatra itself is going to be mainly the residents of New Vrindavan, and of course, if there are some guests, they can join us. So there's only 2 minutes left, so I don't think there's too much time for any more to be said.
Until you can speak more, if that's all right. Once we can extend, or if there are any questions.
It's one of my favorite topics, actually. It's an endless topic.
Yes.
It's extraordinary, and to just, to reflect on how in 1967, a foolish young girl would pick up a little colorful wooden idol, a figurine from a thrift, not a thrift shop, a import store, having no idea what this little thing was, except on the bottom it said made in India. So I was thinking, Swamiji's from India, Prasadam is from India, the Maha Mantra is from India. That's how my little foolish mind, this is from India. Okay, I took it. And then I just put it on we had no furniture. In those days, we didn't think you devotees should have furniture, not even a mattress, not even a mat, We were younger, we could pull it off. So there was just a fireplace, and over the fireplace there was a little shelf called a mantle. I just put it there, and I didn't think so much about it, but Mukunda and Shamsundar brought that little figurine to Srila Prabhupada. And to their astonishment, he made obeisances, and they're like, what is, he goes, this, and very grave. Like, we sometimes get all excited. Actually, Prabhupada said, devotees don't get excited. We become enthusiastic. Excitement, karmis get excited, because they're expecting something. So that was one thing with Prabhupada. He was always very contained, and but he could get enthusiastic also. But he made his obeisance, and he goes, where have you found this? And they go, oh, Malati, she found, call her. So I happened to be downstairs cooking, and one of the assistants who was serving Prabhupada came down and said, Swamiji wants to see you. So even though there was an elevator, in those days I was quite fit. I could run faster than the elevator. So I ran up the steps right away, and I go in and I see that little figurine on his desk. Now his desk was simply the metal trunk that he kept his belongings in. So he asked me, so you have found? And I said, yes. I was kind of a little nervous because I was thinking he might, well, anyway, I was a little worried about the fact that I hadn't paid for him. And he said, you have found? I said, yes. And then he said, were there others? And so immediately I was feeling, oh, there was others. Yes. And but he still remained, very, very grave, like somewhat serious. And I was feeling like a little relieved, a little excited. And he goes, no, two others different. So yes, there were. I remembered the yellow face. I remembered the white face. And he said, bring them. But then he turned to Shamsundar and he said, so Shamsundar, can you carve life-size? And he indicated with his hand a particular height, which for the first 4 sets of Jagannath deities was the height. That was the height they all were. And the first set was in San Francisco and was installed in March, the Gur Purnima in March 23rd of 1967. A very simple ceremony. Now there's these just really intense ceremonies. They can go on for a few days even. Many, many yagas and many rituals but we simply place them on the shelf which became the altar. Shamsundar was told to put a high shelf, high platform. And we had a very high ceiling there. So it was so high, you had to get up on a ladder to reach it. And then he said there should be a canopy, like over their heads. And so Shamsundar made a metal frame, and Jamuna made, and he said it should be blue with gold fringe. So Jamuna covered the frame with the blue cloth and put some gold fringe. And he also said there should be lights. So then Shamsundar arranged for lights, and he put this little thing in the light socket. So when the light bulb was screwed in and the lights were turned on, they would blink on, off, red, yellow, green, blue, they were just blinking. And Prabhupada liked it. He liked that, And so this was the beginning of deity worship in ISKCON, but more importantly here was the appearance of Lord Jagannath in the West. And then in July, he mentioned, like 2 weeks before the event, that it was Rathayatra. And he drew a little sketch of the Rath cart. And in that little sketch, he included the little horses, the 4 little horses. And with only 2 weeks, of course, there wasn't going to be a great big hand-pulled chariot. So the first one, which you can see on YouTube, if you Google YouTube San Francisco Rathayatra 67, you'll see the flatbed truck that was used as a Rath cart. Shamsundar made a canopy, and the deities weren't lined up. The Subhadra faced at the back, Jagannath on one side, Balarama on the other. So they were facing 3 directions. And on the back of the cart, there was a kirtan party with a sound speaker. And he told us there should be profuse flowers, decoration. And we actually hadn't really come across flower markets, wholesale markets at that point, and neither did we really have the money for it. So the devotees went to the park, and they were liberating flowers because they took all the flowers from the park to Golden Gate Park to decorate the Rath cart. And in fact, there were 2 policemen and horses to walk along with the procession. And one of the policemen goes, "What happened to all the flowers?" And the other policeman was looking and goes, "There they are," pointing to the cart. But somehow or other, they were very cool about it. So that was the first Rathayatra of Lord Jagannath. The prasadam was quite simple. It was chapatis, very dry chapatis, because we didn't even have any butter or ghee on them. And I headed up that effort, and I started the day before, well into the night. And the people I enlisted to help me were not cooks. There were anybody who stuck their head in the temple. Come on, we're going to make enough chapatis to feed 1,000 people. They didn't even know what a chapati was. Didn't matter. They were willing to help. And I only had 2 of the rolling pins. And I realized, we're not going to make 1,000 chapatis with 2 rolling pins. So I told them, you go out on the streets and you find some empty wine bottles. Because in the area where we had our temple, there were so many hippies, and among other things, they would drink some wine and put their bottle down. So they brought, and the bottles had this long neck. So they came back with the bottles, and we washed them, dried them, put water inside, put the cork back, and then we used these empty wine bottles to roll the chapatis for the first Rathayatra. Yukta Vairagya, utility is the principle, they say. And hopefully, I think Lord Jagannath, Prabhupada explains how he's especially merciful for the people of Kali Yuga, especially for the Malechas, which, nowadays we can all at least qualify as a Malecha, so if we don't qualify anything, we can, okay, we're a Malecha. But the Lord is so merciful. Even in Puri, Prabhupada explains how in Puri, most of the people in Orissa, they're fish eaters. He says 90% of the people, and still Lord Jagannath accepts their service. So what to speak of us who are just struggling, to be his servant. And when we went to Puri with Srila Prabhupada, he wouldn't go in the temple. He could have gone in, but he wouldn't go in. That unless my devotees come, I am not going to go. One day they're going to get it. And one day those doors will be open. But in the meantime, by Prabhupada's mercy, we have the presence of Lord Jagannath all over the world. And practically every one of our temples almost has Lord Jagannath. And we're so fortunate that all we have to do when all the COVID's over is go to our temple. And if your temple's not open, please come to New Vrindavan because we're open. And everything's running very nicely. Restrictions apply, of course, face mask, sanitizer, all that, distancing. But Lord Jagannath, of course, now he's sick. Can't see him. but 2 weeks Rathayatra, and he'll be back on the altar. So consider coming and visiting us very soon.
Thank you very much. Anybody has any questions or comments?
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandot Pranam. It was such a enlivening class, and the best part of the class was the last 15 minutes of you explaining how, because of Jagannath's mercy on you, how Jagannathji appeared in United States, and from there hundreds of Rathayatras manifested.
Yeah.
And just wanted to express our gratitude and thank you, Mataji. From the bottom of our hearts, it was very enlivening. All glories to you and all glories to Lord Jagannath.
All glories to Srila Prabhupada.
All glories to Prabhupada.
Okay.
Anybody else? Jasoda Dula Prabhu, you had a question? Jasoda Dula Prabhu addressed the question.
Cannot hear some.
Yeah.
Hare Krishna Mataji.
What happened? Somebody had a question?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Hare Krishna Mataji. Mataji, the deity that you found is still in a California temple?
No, unfortunately, along with our youth was limited. We weren't looking ahead. We were just living by the day mostly. So at that time, it did not occur to me that in addition to being the Lord of the universe, these little figurines were quite significant. So when we left America to go to England, they came with us. They were worshipped there a little, personally. And then when we were sent to India, they came also. But in India, it was much more austere. Like when we first went to England, it was pretty austere, and we were just we didn't have a fixed zip code. Means we didn't have a fixed address. We were moving and moving until we got our temple, and that was a little difficult, for me with a kid, a husband, deities, like. But when we went to India, oh my God, it was even more so because, again, we didn't have a fixed residence. And so we were just moving here and there, here and there. And if somebody would invite us to go somewhere, like it could be another city, which generally it was, we would go. Wherever Prabhupada said to go, we would go. So basically, I wasn't really able to properly take care of them. So at one point, after maybe it was a couple of years, the son of Surabhi Abhipalaksham, he was the devotee who was the architect for the temple in Vrindavan and also in Juhu. He had a little son. Prior to taking sannyas, he'd been married, had a son, and his son was going to go to Gurukul in New Vrindavan. So I was thinking, this little boy, this small boy, he's going to be far away from his mother and his father. He may feel, some loneliness, and he was attracted to Lord Jagannath. So without thinking that maybe I should find another Lord Jagannath, I just gave him those little deities. And he had those deities in New Vrindavan. But then a letter came from Srila Prabhupada. And in that letter, he was explaining how the children below 10 shouldn't have deities. You shouldn't give them deities, and even mention Jagannath, because, kids, they put their fingers in the nose, in their ears, in their eyes, in their mouth. Kids aren't always so clean, not so suchi. And he said, so below 10, they shouldn't have deities. He said, before that, they can learn how to clap and dance and clean the utensils. They can even learn how to make garlands, clean the temples. All of these are part of deity worship. So that letter came. And so then the leader of New Vrindavan took all of the children, they had little deities, but he took the deities from them. Not out of any mean spirit, but because Prabhupada was, he gave this instruction. So those deities were also taken. And I really don't think that that person, Kirtananda Swami, he didn't know that these were the original Jagannath deities. Are certainly, had he known that, he would have made some special, arrangement for them. And as I say, I just didn't have the foresight, the vision to realize that this was something a little special. But on the other hand, Jagannath Krishna goes where he wants to go, how he wants to get there. So, I guess it was, in part, it was also his choice. So I don't know where they are.
Yeah. Thank you, Mataji.
Thank you very much, Mataji.
Okay.
So, anybody else? Mataji, we had wonderful Snan Yatra in early part of June.
Yes.
We do it on the actual day as
Oh,
Puri temple.
yes.
So we had 180 devotees. It's in a restriction. They came in, they bathed the deities, they came out. We had prasadam for them.
Nice.
Bhakti Charu Maharaj, that day he had come from India and he came and he did the Aarti of Lord Jagannath.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Very
And then we had a Rath-Yatra.
Well, we have to, he came to India to bathe Lord Jagannath in New Jersey. So Lord Jagannath, he better take care of Maharaj.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
So we had Rath-Yatra on the actual day, and now next Saturday we are going to have Ulta Rath Bahuda Yatra.
Okay.
So
This
normally
means on the 4th.
yeah, July 4th.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wonderful.
And every year we do 3 Rath-Yatras, one in Atlantic City, which we had to cancel this time. And one in Addison on the most busiest road. That also we have cancelled, but on the actual day around the temple, we still did, and Ulta Rath will do that.
Wow.
So please bless us, Mataji,
Thank you
our
so much
deities.
for being part of a wonderful, Prabhupada in writing, he said, I want that this Rathayatra festival go on in all the major cities.
Yeah.
And he explained, we all know that story when he was 5 years old, how he made his father purchase a small Rath cart, and he put on a little Rathayatra festival for his neighborhood, And he said, from my childhood, this Rathayatra festival has been very dear to me.
Let's see. Our deities of Jagannath, Baldev, Subhadra, which are installed at our temple, also got installed in 2016. And
When?
they were made, in 2016, it were installed.
Okay.
And that was the same, from the same wood as the Navakalevara wood, from which the deities in Jagannath Puri got installed.
Yeah. And that was 2016 was the 50th year anniversary of ISKCON.
Yes.
So auspicious.
Thank you.
So now I have to come to your temple and
Please,
darshan.
we'll be honored.
Yeah.
Yes.
If things ever get somewhat opened up again, I can do that.
Yes.
Get somebody to come with me to help drive. Thank you all so much for letting me speak. And I wish you well on your
question.
pardon.
Hare Krishna Mataji, Dandat Pranam.
Well,
It was so nice to hear from you. Like you were being instrumental in having Jagannathji to the Western world, and because of you, we are getting the mercy of Lord Jagannath outside. Thank you, Mataji. And yes, please come and visit our temple, Mataji.
thank
We'll
you.
be happy to have you here.
I would be happy to go there. Now my mind is always starting to think, okay, when can I go? I will go here, I will go there, but I will definitely go to your temple.
Thank you, Mataji.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Hamad Jagannath Prabhu, Prem Radhika Mataji are instrumental to get Lord Jagannath deities way back when we had our pitching center where we rent our hall every week. They got the deities in our hall from 2005.
Hare Krishna Mataji, thank you so much for wonderful lecture. Please, we are looking forward to visit you, see you Mataji. Please do come to our temple.
I'm
Thank you
also
so
looking
much.
forward to seeing all of you, because Jagannath is not alone. Of course, he has his brother and sister. In fact, Prabhupada told us that Jagannath never goes anywhere without his brother and sister. He told us that because one time we took Jagannath, only Jagannath deity, out of the temple to the park. And it's a famous picture you can see. There's Jagannath standing there. He doesn't even have sewn cloth, because in the first year, we didn't dress him, just he had his painted dress on. And we were having a kirtan in the park, and Srila Prabhupada was going to come. So we were thinking how to surprise him. And so we brought the deity, and he was definitely surprised. Afterward, he said, we should never do this again, that the Lord only comes out once a year for his Rathayatra. And he never comes out alone. He's always with his brother and sister.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mataji.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you very
Hare
much. Mataji.
Krishna. I take your leave.
Thank you very much. Again, all glories to you.
All
let's
glories to
sing
all of you.
Mataji with a loud Haribo.
Haribo.
Haribo, Haribo, Haribo.
Haribo.
Gaur Bhakta-vrinda
Mataji, Jai.
The Malati ki.
Jai.
Thank you very much, everybody, for joining. Okay. Quick announcements. On coming Wednesday is Ekadasi, right? Let's see where is coming Wednesday is July 1st. San Ekadasi on July 1st. Minimally fasting from grains and beans and increasing our Krishna consciousness. We'll be having a Ekadasi Kirtan that day in the evening at our temple. Right, Jayaprakash Prabhu?
Yes, Madhuvati Prabhu.
Yes.
7 to 9.
From 7 to 9, there'll be Ekadasi Kirtan at the temple, served with Ekadasi Prasadam. Please come, join, with proper restrictions. But yeah, our temple is big enough to accommodate. July 2nd, Thursday, the Pana time of Ekadasi is 5:31 a.m. to 5:50 a.m. Very short duration. So please make a note of that. 5:31 a.m. to 5:50 a.m. July 4th, Saturday, apart from the Independence Day here, it's Vyas Purnima, Vyas Dev's appearance day. Also disappearance day of Srila Sanatana Goswami. Also the first month of Chaturmasya starts on that day, fasting from green leafy vegetables. And that day we also do the Ratha-Yatra in the evening. Right, Jaganatha?
Yes, Prabhu.
Yeah. So we'll be sending out the details for that. Okay. Apart from that, every day in the morning, you're most welcome to join for our morning chanting. The morning chanting is from 5 to 6:30. And from 6:30 to 7 is a Bhagavatam class. So you're most welcome to join the devotees who are joining regularly and hearing Bhagavad Katha, Bhagavatam class. So if you would like to join, you can. Okay. Anything else? Krishna Nama Prabhu?
That's it, Prabhu. That's it. Hare Krishna.
That's it. Okay. Our prayers are still there. Let's end with the Narsingha prayers. We can chant Narsinga prayers. Jai Prakash Prabhu.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Namaste Narasingaya.
Pralada Ladadayine. Anyakase Purvaksaha.
Bhakti Purvakshaha. Tilakanga Hare.
Narasimha Paratam Yato yami tato Narasimha.
Yato yami tato
Jaya Narasimha Hridaya Narasimha. Narasimha Sarananda Pradayam. Kamalavahe Naka Adbhuta Venga Harita Hiranya Dhanavenga Keshavarita Hari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare.
Jai Jagannatha Hare.
Jaya Keshavarita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadesha Hare Jai Jagadesha Hare Jai Jagadesha Hare.
Jaya Keshavarita Narahari Rupa
Jai Jagannatha Hare. Jai Jagannatha Hare. Jai Jagannatha Hare.
Narasimha Dev Jaya Narasimha Dev Jaya
Jaya Narsingadev, Narsingadev, Jaya Narsingadev,
Jaya Narahari Jaya Narahari Jaya Narahari Jaya Narahari
Jaya Narahari, Jaya Narahari, Jaya Narahari.
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj
Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj, Jaya Prahlad Maharaj.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada
Jai Jai Prabhupada,
Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada.
Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol,
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol,
Hari
Hari
Bol,
Bol, Hari
Hari
Bol,
Bol,
Nitai Gaura Hari Bol.
Sundadev Bhagwan ki
Jai. Jai. Lad
Lord
Maharaj ki
Maharaj ki jai.
Jai.
All Premanande Hari Hari.
Hari Hari
Hari
Bol.
Bol.
Hari Bol.